Reflecting the world in polished chrome, our stories show you the sharp edges and the smooth surfaces of reality. Dive into these high-contrast reflections of the human experience and find yourself within the frame. Click subscribe now and see the world through our unique cinematic lens.
Morning, my mother called. I was standing on the balcony at my penthouse, 31 floors above the city, holding a cup of coffee that cost more than the shoes she bought me for my high school graduation. I didn't answer. I watched the name flash on my screen, Mom, and I let it go to voicemail the same way she let every call from me go to voicemail for 4 years. 4 years. That's how long my family decided I didn't exist. Not a birthday text. Not a holiday card. Nothing. The last thing my father said to me, standing in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, was that I had made my choice and now I had to live with it. My choice, by the way, was refusing to drop out of my architecture program to move back home and babysit my younger brother Dylan while he figured things out. Dylan was 23 at the time. He did not need a babysitter. He needed consequences, which was something my parents had never once been willing to give him. I had worked 2 jobs to stay in school after they cut off my tuition payments. I ate instant noodles 4 nights a week. I borrowed a winter coat from a friend because I couldn't afford one. I defended my thesis in a blazer I bought secondhand for $7, and I graduated without a single person in that auditorium who shared my last name. That was 4 years ago. Now I owned a firm, 11 employees, contracts with 3 commercial developers in the state. My name was on the door in brushed gold letters, and the penthouse I lived in was not rented, it was mine. Purchased 18 months ago when my second major project closed and the commission landed in my account like a quiet earthquake. My mother called again the next morning. Then my father. Then a number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, who I actually liked and who left a voicemail that said simply, "Elena, it's Patricia. Call me when you can. Something is happening with your brother and your parents are, just call me, okay?" I called Patricia. "They didn't tell me they were going to reach out to you," she said immediately, like she was apologizing in advance. "I found out last night. I thought you should hear it from someone who isn't going to spin it." "Hear what?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. Dylan co-signed a business loan 2 years ago with one of his friends. The restaurant they opened failed. The friend disappeared. The loan is entirely in Dylan's name now. "It's significant, Elena. We're talking about $240,000. I set my coffee down. "Your parents," Patricia continued carefully, "have been trying to cover it quietly. They refinanced the house. They pulled from their retirement. They're still short by about $90,000. And now they want to ask you for the rest. Patricia, I know. They didn't speak to me for 4 years. I know, honey. My father told me I made my choice. I know what he said." Her voice was soft and tired. "I'm not calling to convince you of anything. I'm calling because they're going to show up, Elena. I don't think they're going to call first. I think they're going to show up at your office or your home, and I thought you deserved to be prepared." I thanked her. I hung up. I stood in the middle of my living room for a long time, looking out at the skyline. And I thought about what it felt like to sit in a parking lot outside a grocery store and cry because I had $19 in my account and rent was due in 3 days and not one person in my family had thought to check on me. They showed up on a Thursday. I was in a meeting with a contractor when my front desk coordinator, a composed and unflappable young woman named Meg, appeared in the doorway with an expression I had never seen on her face before. I excused myself. "There are 2 people in the lobby," Meg said quietly, pulling the door half closed behind her. "They say they're your parents. They don't have an appointment. They've been here for about 10 minutes. I told them you were with a client and they said they'd wait." She paused. "They've been arguing with each other in low voices the entire time. I can hear it from my desk." I looked at her. "Did they say what they want?" "Your father said it was a family matter and it was urgent." She hesitated. "He also asked me how long you'd owned the firm." "Of course he did." I went back into the meeting, apologized, rescheduled, and walked the contractor out through the side entrance so he wouldn't have to pass through the lobby. Then I stood in the hallway for approximately 45 seconds and made a decision. I went to my office first. I opened my laptop and I started a voice recording app I had downloaded months earlier for client meetings. I put my phone in my blazer pocket with the microphone facing out. I straightened my jacket. And then I walked into the lobby. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. My father looked older. They were both wearing the same kind of careful, assembled expressions that people wear when they need something and they know they're going to have to ask for it in a way that costs them something. My mother's eyes filled immediately. "Elena." "Hi," I said, "not Mom. Not hi, Mom. Just hi." My father looked around the lobby at the design samples on the wall, at the framed project photos, at the brushed gold lettering on the glass panel by the entrance, and something moved across his face that I couldn't entirely read. It might have been pride. It might have been calculation. With him, those two things had always looked similar. "Can we go somewhere private?" he asked. I brought them into the small conference room we used for preliminary client consultations. I offered water. My mother said yes. My father said no and then changed his mind. I poured 2 glasses and sat across from them, and I waited. My mother started. She talked about how much they had missed me, how hard the last few years had been, how they had thought about calling but hadn't known what to say, and time had passed and it became harder and harder to bridge the distance. She said she was sorry. She said it in the careful, abbreviated way that people apologize when they're apologizing as a preamble to asking for something rather than because the apology is the point. I said, "Okay." My father cleared his throat. He explained the situation with Dylan. The loan, the failed restaurant, the partner who had vanished. He used the word unfortunate 3 times. He explained what they had already done, the refinance, the retirement withdrawal, and he laid out the remaining number the way a contractor lays out a bid, matter-of-factly, as though the figure were simply a logistical detail and not a demand directed at a daughter they had not spoken to in 4 years. $90,000. "We're not asking for a gift," my father said. "We'd pay you back. We'd put it in writing." "What collateral?" I asked. He blinked. "What? If it's a loan, what collateral are you offering?" My mother made a small sound. My father's jaw tightened slightly. "Elena, this is family. We're not going to draw up collateral agreements between family members." "You said you'd put it in writing," I said. "Writing means a contract?" "A contract specifies terms. I'm asking about the terms." "The terms," my father said, and his voice had shifted slightly. There was an edge appearing, something impatient, "are that we are your parents and your brother is in serious trouble and we need your help." I looked at him for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. When I was 22 and I needed help staying in school and I called home, why didn't that same logic apply?" The room was very quiet. "That was a different situation," my mother said. "How?" "You had made a choice that we disagreed with. You chose your education over your family." "I chose to finish my degree," I said. "Dylan chose to co-sign a $250,000 loan with someone he'd known for 18 months. Those are both choices. I'm curious why one of them qualifies for family rescue and the other one didn't." My father leaned forward. "We made mistakes. Your mother just told you we're sorry. Are you going to hold that over us forever, or are you going to act like an adult and help your brother?" And there it was. The reframe that I had been waiting for without fully knowing I was waiting for it, the pivot from apology to pressure, the suggestion that extending help was the mature option and that withholding it was petty. My father had always been skilled at this, at rearranging the architecture of a situation so that whatever he wanted became the reasonable position, and any resistance became a character flaw in whoever was resisting. "I'm gonna think about it," I said. He hadn't expected that. He had expected either yes or an argument he could push back against. "I'm going to think about it," left him with nothing to grip. "How long?" he asked. "I'll call you by Friday." They left. I sat in the conference room alone for a while. Then I took my phone out of my pocket and stopped the recording. I called my attorney that afternoon. Her name is Susan. She's been my business attorney since I started the firm, and she is one of the most precise thinkers I have ever encountered. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always appreciated about her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know you don't have to do anything. You could simply say no." "I know," I said. "But I'd been thinking about something since yesterday and I want to know if it's legally sound." I told her what I was thinking. Another silence. Then, "That is actually quite elegant," she said. "Let me review the loan documentation. Can you give me Dylan's loan details?" I called Patricia, who called Dylan, who, apparently panicked enough to cooperate, sent me the full loan file by 9 o'clock that evening. Susan called me at 11. "It's clean," she said. "The original lender has already sold the debt to a collections agency. Collections agencies sell debt. That's the entire business model. If you approach them as a private buyer, you're simply another purchaser in the chain." "And then I'm the creditor," I said. "Then you are the creditor," Susan confirmed. "You set the repayment terms, you decide the schedule, you decide the interest rate within legal limits. And if Dylan defaults to you, you pursue him, not your parents." "What would I actually pay for the debt?" "Distressed debt of this type, this far into default, typically sells for somewhere between 15 and 30 cents on the dollar. You'd likely pay somewhere between $35,000 and $55,000 to own a $240,000 debt instrument. I wrote the number down. Can we structure it quickly? If the collections agency agrees, a week, maybe less. I called my father on Friday, as I had said I would. I told him I had thought about it and I was willing to help Dylan. I told him I wasn't going to transfer money directly to them. I would handle the debt situation myself, through proper financial channels in a way that protected everyone and provided a clean legal resolution. I said I needed one meeting, with Dylan present, to go over the structure. My father sounded relieved in the careful, controlled way that he expressed every emotion. He said that sounded very responsible. He said he was glad I had come around. We met the following Wednesday at my office in the same conference room. My parents, Dylan, who was thinner than I remembered and who couldn't quite look at me directly, and me, with Susan sitting to my left with a folder on the table in front of her. Dylan had been expecting, I think, something simple. A check. An uncomfortable family moment followed by financial relief. He sat across from me with the specific posture of someone who was embarrassed, but also, underneath the embarrassment, slightly expectant. My father had explained to them that I was handling the debt through financial channels. I don't think any of them had thought through what that meant. Susan spoke first. She explained clearly and without editorializing that I had purchased Dylan's outstanding loan debt from the collections agency holding it. She placed a copy of the purchase agreement on the table. She explained that I was now, legally, Dylan's creditor. She placed a copy of the new repayment agreement on the table. She outlined the terms, repayment over 7 years, at a below-market interest rate that was still, she noted, more generous than the original loan terms had been. The room was extremely quiet. Dylan stared at the document. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at me. "What is this?" he said. "It's a debt restructuring," I said. "Dylan's debt is now owed to me instead of a collections agency. The terms are more manageable. He has 7 years instead of being in immediate default. The interest rate is lower. We came to you for help," my father said, and his voice had that edge again, sharper now. "Not for a transaction. You came to me for $90,000, I said. I've resolved a $240,000 problem for significantly less than that. Dylan is no longer in default. The collections pressure stops immediately. His credit recovery can begin. That is help. It's just not the specific shape of help you were imagining. You're going to make your brother pay you back?" my mother said. Her voice was unsteady. "Dylan took out a loan," I said. "The loan exists regardless of what I do. He was going to pay someone back. Now he pays me back, on better terms, with someone in his corner who actually wants him to succeed. How is that worse?" "Because you're his sister," she said. "Yes," I said. "I am. I've been his sister for 29 years, including the 4 years when none of you called me." My father started to speak. I held up one hand. Not aggressively, just clearly, and he stopped. "I want to say something," I said, "and I want to say it once, so I'd like everyone to hear it." No one moved. I don't have anger about the last 4 years anymore. I processed that a long time ago, largely on my own because I didn't have a choice. What I have instead is clarity. I understand now that in this family, help has always been conditional. It goes to whoever is in the most immediate crisis, regardless of who was in crisis before, regardless of who was ignored before. I spent 4 years building something, this firm, this career, this life, without any support from any of you. I did it anyway, and I'm proud of that. But I am not a bank you can access when there's an emergency. I'm a person. And I'm willing to have a relationship with all of you going forward, if that's something everyone here actually wants. But it has to be a real one, not one that reactivates when there's a financial shortfall and goes quiet the rest of the time. My father looked at the table. My mother was crying quietly. Dylan, for the first time since he'd sat down, looked directly at me. He looked young and tired and more honest than I'd seen him look in years. "I'm sorry, Elena," he said. "I know that doesn't fix it, but I am. It wasn't nothing. It wasn't everything. It was a beginning of something, maybe, or at least the raw material that beginnings are made from." I nodded. "Make your payments on time," I said. "That's where we start." My father looked up. "And the $90,000 you were going to give us, I spent approximately $48,000 purchasing the debt," I said. "I don't have $90,000 to give you. I have a solution that costs less and works better. If you needed cash for the refinance payment, that's a separate conversation and a separate structure. But I'd want Susan to draft the terms." His mouth opened, closed. He looked around the room, at the firm, at Susan, at me, with the expression of a man who had come in expecting to lead a conversation and had found himself in the middle of one that had been architected long before he arrived. "Fine," he said finally. His voice was quieter than it had been. Some of the performance had gone out of it. "Fine." Susan gathered her documents. I walked my family out. At the elevator, my mother touched my arm and said my name, just my name, nothing else, and I think she meant it as more than a word. I let her. I didn't pull away. In the weeks that followed, Dylan made his first payment on the 1st of the month. He sent it with a short message, payment attached. "I'm working 2 jobs right now. I'll make it work." I replied, "I know you will." My parents called the following Sunday, not to ask for anything. My mother talked about a garden she was trying to start. My father mentioned a news story he'd been following. It was a 20-minute phone call. It was not warm exactly. It was not uncomplicated, but it was something. I've thought a lot about what people always say about family, that blood is thicker than water, that you only get one, that you'll regret it if you walk away. I used to feel the weight of that. I used to let it make me smaller. I let it make me available for things I shouldn't have been available for, and I let it make me feel guilty for the things I wasn't available for. What I know now is that the people who say those things usually say them to the person being asked to give something, never to the person being asked to give something back. Obligation, in my experience, tends to flow in one direction in families like mine, downhill, toward whoever has the most and has sacrificed the most to get it. I'm not interested in obligation. I'm interested in something that actually resembles a family. The door is open, the terms are on the table, and for the first time in a long time I'm the one who wrote them.